I'm back with Professor Ruth Wisse, author of the memoir Free as a Jew. Ruth, we were talking about Fiddler on the Roof and Sholem Aleichem, and one of the tensions running throughout that work, and you see it in the musical, is the tension between tradition and modernity. Now, you use the phrase conservative. You identify as a conservative, but it seems that originally and for much of your early life, you were a conservative in the cultural, perhaps literary sense, and only later, and you talk about this, you became sort of a neoconservative. You became identified more with a political conservatism. Can you talk first about what does it mean to be a cultural conservative? And then if we can, we'll talk about political conservatism and its link to cultural conservatism.
Well, since our lead into this was speaking about Sholem Aleichem and the character of Tevye, he is perhaps our most interesting example of what you're describing, because Tevye has a very liberal personality. Culturally, you might say, of course, he loves his daughters. And when his first daughter comes to him and says, I don't want my marriage arranged in the traditional manner, I want to choose for myself, he finds it very hard to accept this, but he yields. So Tevye yields, and that is a very liberal tendency. He yields to love, he yields to argument. He is a lenient personality, milky, by the way, in character. It's not accidental that he's a dairyman. Judaism makes very strict distinctions between milk and meat. And in Jewish literature, when you see someone as a butcher, you know what's coming because of that distinction. Clearly, also, when he makes him a dairyman, he has a milky personality. But here's the interesting thing about Tevye. In each successive episode, something in him has to harden. Why? Because these daughters, each of them is asking for something more and more radically anti-Jewish, so that the third of them actually converts to Christianity. And at that part, the father in him comes into conflict with the Jew. And here's the hardest part. He considers her dead. He goes into mourning for her, insists that the family break with her. Now, this episode, you see, bothered this episode bothered the creators of Fiddler on the Roof. They are American Jews. They couldn't take that. So at the end of their work, the end of Fiddler on the Roof, they have this intermarried couple coming along and saying, you have to make your peace with us, to Tevye, because, the Christian son-in-law says, I wouldn't stay here when they're against the Jews either. So the two of them going off together, and Tevye at the end of Fiddler on the Roof makes his peace with it. How wonderful. Not in the original. Never in the original. In the original, the daughter leaves her husband and comes home to her father. And the only reason she can do that is because he had stood firm as a Jew. So being a Jew to Sholem Aleichem and to his readers was everything. And there are certain things that you don't compromise. You don't just say, turkey, turkey, you're a fish or something, and just turn it over to something else. But the American Jews can't see that. The writers, they couldn't even understand what the problem was when it was presented to them as something that they had, so debonairly transformed, changed, something really important in the original work. They hardly understood what the big deal was, you see, because really, you would break up a family because of intermarriage? What is that about?
Yeah, I mean, part of what you're showing me just through this analysis is kind of why we read books, because they expose us to experiences that we otherwise might not have. We're living, as you say, in a kind of ecumenical time in which some of these conflicts are difficult to grasp, but isn't that exactly why we need to grasp them? Now, let me have you fast forward a little bit, just because of time. Talk a little bit about presenting this kind of wonderful corpus of not just the Jewish, but more broadly, the Judeo-Christian, the Western tradition. What do you think has happened to this kind of knowledge in the university today? You are at the premier college in the country, Harvard. Do you think that these colleges are still, you may say, connected to the great issues of this tradition, or have they just become uprooted and deracinated from it?
Well, it's a great question, but I think that at the root of it, it's not even so much which works one is studying. It is not even, how you interpret it, but it's just the reading of text itself, that you would take literature, for example, to be instruction in how better and better and deeper to read. That is what literature used to be when I went into the field. You took a work and you kind of got into it with the class together in discussion, words, paragraphs, chapters, characters, everything. That has been really sacrificed to the idea of theory that you then impose on literature. Oh, I'm going to give a course on gender. Now, what fits into this course on gender? Oh, I will take a book which really shows you about the liberation of women. I will give, you see what I mean? That the whole idea of teaching, and I'm taking literature here only as an example, the teaching of literature became really an ideological pursuit more and more. And that these texts were meant to be only a way of getting across your own biases and prejudices, which to my mind, were not going in the right direction anyway. So I think at root, the whole idea of what education consists of, really, that had changed dramatically by the time I left Harvard. And this was quite shattering to me.
Well, Ruth, with your permission, I'd like to make a proposal to you, and that is, let's have you come back, and let's pick a single book that you discuss right in your memoir, and let's devote an interview just to talking about it, because I want people to see through conversation the kind of stuff that happens in a real classroom. I think these real classrooms have become more and more rare in America today. And so I want to thank you for joining me for now, but with your permission, we'll circle back, as they say, and let's have a conversation about, maybe we'll talk about Bellows Herzog, and talk about it as a kind of classic work, very much along the lines of how you describe it. So thank you so much for joining me.
It would be a delight, Dinesh. Thank you.
I look forward to having you back. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.